Hey guys, MC Stu here, and today we're going to take a look at a torpedo build I've put together. This is on the Temer Raider, which was the event ship that we got this year for the anniversary event. I put out a teaser video a few months back on the Janeway, which was a quasi-meta sci drain kind of a build. And I've been kind of going back and forth whether or not I wanted to post that build or not. I may in the future, but I decided not to because that build in particular and in general, the meta torpedo builds are extremely expensive to put together. And I wanted to try and put together a torpedo build that works, that would be somewhat easier, you know, for the general player base to obtain. So I've scaled that down to basically a C-store ship and then a Lobby ship that's specific really for a torpedo build, the rest being things that you can get from your specializations or are from ships that you know, we would purchase that are going to be universal for a lot of different kinds of builds, basically off of ships that were in the top 5 C-store ship list that I'd put together a while back. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Before that, I just want to again say thank you to everybody that has subbed to the channel and leaves me the thumbs up and those kinds of things. It really helps me out quite a bit, and I really appreciate that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the build here. So, and let me just say right off the top, the gear and the configuration and really kind of the whole build methodology behind this was put together and perfected by Augmented Dictator Gaming. If you are looking for, you know, a high-end meta build and resources aren't an issue for you, I would definitely check out his channel. He has quite a bit in terms of torpedo and kinetic builds. I'll put a link down in the description. I have access to most of that, and again, I was kind of going back and forth on how I wanted to present this, but my channel, I really try and focus on, you know, your casual players that are trying to, you know, maybe increase their damage, or new players coming into the game. And some of these things, I mean, it's taken me years of playing, putting money into the game here in the last year or so, and lots of grinding to be able to get to a level where I can put together some of these meta builds. So I wanted to put together, like I said, something that's a little bit easier to obtain. So let's go ahead and we'll start with looking at the gear here, and I'll briefly mention some of the things I've taken off to kind of slim down the cost of this as well, just so you can get an idea of what would go there if you had these other resources. And I should say also here, before we get too far into it, the shield that I have on this is pretty unique. I'm sure I'll get some questions on it. So this is the Discovery shield. Vanity shield, and this is a unique look that it has that only appears on KDF characters. It's partially why I'm doing the video on my KDF tune, because I personally like the way this looks. I know some people hate it. I like that it looks very ornate. If you put this shield on a Fed tune, it's going to look like more of your classic kind of, you know, Fed skin design. It's not going to have this more kind of tribal Viking kind of look, which I really like. The cool thing with the ship wall coming down as well is now that you can fly Fed ships on KDF, you can put this shield on here and you'll still get that Fed or that Klingon effect, KDF effect from the shield even on a Federation ship. So it's kind of cool. Again, that is the Discovery Vanity shield. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the build here. First item we have is the EBM, which is the Enhanced Biomolecular Photon Torpedo. This comes from the Counter Command rep. Excellent torpedo, does a ton of damage, and it also has a secondary effect of radiation damage. So this is a excellent torpedo. It's probably the hardest hitting torpedo on the build. Maybe in close competition to the next one here, which is the Neutronic Torpedo. This comes from the Delta rep. Next, we have the Dark Matter Torpedo from the Disco rep. I'm using the 3-piece along with the Wide Angle Disruptor Dual Beam Bank and also the Lorcator console. We'll get into the individual pieces here in a moment. The wide angle is primarily here just to complete that 3-piece set on it. It does an okay amount of damage. It's not going to rate real high on the parse, but let's go ahead and take a look at that 3-piece, and we'll look at the 2-piece as well, which I run that 2-piece on pretty much everything. So your 2-piece is going to give you a stacking critical severity. So every time you get a crit hit, you're going to get a 1% critical severity. This will stack 25 times, and it refreshes every 20 seconds, but as you get hits, this clock is going to reset. So once you get 25 critical hits, you'll be at 25 max on the critical severity. And as long as you're continuing to get critical hits every 20 seconds, you will continue to maintain that 25% bonus. Now the 3-piece, the reason we're slotting the dual beam wide angle array here is for this here. So essentially any foe that's within range, weapons range 10 kilometers, that's under 50% health, this is going to fire a dark matter torpedo at them. It'll fire 1 per second until they're dead, and it'll fire in any direction. So it's basically an omnidirectional torpedo launcher is essentially what you get out of this 3-piece set, and it just automatically fires at any enemy that is under 50% health that's within your firing range of 10 kilometers, which complements this build very, very good. And it's definitely worth having that 3-piece on there. If that wasn't there, we obviously would not run the wide beam bank here. We would just run the torpedo and the console. Console and the torpedo by themselves are excellent. The 2-piece is phenomenal. And again, on a torpedo build, this just makes perfect sense. Next item up front we have is the Morphogenic torpedo. This comes from the mission home. I am running the 3-piece on this. So we have the torpedo. We have the morphogenic weapon in the back, energy weapon. This will either do beam or cannon mode depending on the firing mode that you're using. We will be using all 3 of the different kinds of firing modes between torpedo, cannon, and beam. So you'll get at least those 2 variations out of it. Again, this is not going to show up very high on the parse. This is here to complete the 3-piece, and we'll get to the 3-piece bonus here in just a moment. This is somewhat counterintuitive to my general rule that we don't want to just chase set bonuses, but that's, I guess I should caveat that we don't want to chase it for the sake of chasing it. The 3-piece bonus that we get out of this, and the 2-piece bonus, but mainly the 3-piece bonus out of this, is phenomenal. Let's just go ahead and look at all 3 pieces, and then we'll look at that. I don't want to jump around too much here, but just so it kind of flows together. The tactical console, and this has to go in tactical, unfortunately, again, is kind of meh for this torpedo build. If we were doing a Polaron build, in fact, if you're doing any kind of Polaron build, you're going to want to run this 3-piece set. This is mainly going to help with that, with the weapons reduction cost, the extra damage output for Polaron, the drain, which is generally the stock proc that is associated with Polaron, and then we do get some extra weapons damage if we're firing on the rear 90-degree arc of a target, which on a Raider like this is nice if you're getting the flanking bonus as well. So that does stack some. It's definitely not enough to put this console in, though, for what these passives are. In fact, none of these items are worth putting in purely for what they do individually. So let's take a look at that 2 and 3 piece. The 2-piece is going to give us a reduction on basically any and all of our firing modes by 15%, recharge time reduction, fire at will, and on, basically any kind of firing mode, including mines and dispersal patterns that you can run on your bridge officers. So that's a nice little boost. Again, we wouldn't run this 3-piece just for that. This is where the gold is here. So anytime you activate a beam firing mode, you're going to get plus 2% critical chance. Anytime you do a cannon mode, you're going to get plus 10% critical severity. And then anytime you activate a torpedo firing mode, we're going to get an extra 7.5% weapons damage. Now this is a Cat 1 bonus, so it's not really a big deal. All of this stacks up to 3 times, so we can get a total of 6% and 30% on the critical chance and critical severity, and that is why this set is here. So before I go into combat, I'll go through all of those modes 3 times. It lasts 45 seconds. So when I start off combat, I'm going to be sitting at a plus 6% on the critical chance and plus 30% on the critical severity. That is huge, especially if you're already building towards that critical chance, critical severity, which you should be if you're building for damage output on most builds. You're going to want that, and this is going to complement and really push that up to the next level. And you'll see that this set actually synergizes very good with a torpedo build and with the must-have trait for a torpedo build. And we'll get to that shortly when we get to the trait section here. So let's go ahead and look at the space sets that we're running here. So we're running the standard colony deflector for the critical chance, critical severity. We are running the standard competitive engine for the extra speed boost and the cooldown on tactical bridge officer abilities. Next, we're running the two-piece from the temporal rep. And the reason we're running this, again, there's nothing individually that's super special about those, but it gives a area of effect damage increase, area effect and hazard by 25%. And this is going to proc or complement the main damage output of this build, which isn't the torpedoes. It's actually going to come from a trait that is procced by the torpedoes. And when we get to the traits, I'll kind of go into this a little bit more, because if you're wanting to do a build like this and maybe you don't have any of these traits, we'll look at what you need to get first, what's going to be most beneficial, because even without the trait that this is proccing, you would still be able to do, over 100K, maybe more than that, a little bit more than that. And in that instance, I'd recommend running the Discovery two-piece set for the extra shield pen you get from the shield itself, and the two-piece giving you more survivability. But with the traits that, again, we'll jump to that in a minute and go over, this is going to really, really boost that. And you'll find on the parse, it's generally going to be number 1 or number 2 on the damage getter list. If this was a meta build, that trait that I keep alluding to is going to be the number 1 damage getter all day long. So that's why we have that two-piece. We've gone over the weapon in the back. For the experimental weapon, I am running the Soliton Wave Impeller. This is from the summer event 2 years back from the Ryzian Corvette. If you don't have this, use whatever you have. Voice of the Prophets would probably be the next best one. There is one in the rep. I can't remember which one. Maybe someone can put it in the comments. It is, I think, the artillery something or other. You can run that as well, or just the stock one that comes with it. Just make sure it's fully upgraded. The Soliton Wave Impeller, though, does a ton of damage. It's complemented well in a build like this because the firing cycle on it it gets faster, or the word I'm looking for, it scales basically with your engine power. And so my engine power is at maximum because I really don't have to have power in anything else, because torpedoes don't use any kind of system power. So that really complements on a build like this. And regardless, it's just such a good experimental weapon. I would use it on any ship that has an experimental weapon slot. Let's take a look at the devices. So pretty standard setup here that I run on everything, except instead of energy amplifiers, we're running kinetic amplifiers. And this is giving us 30% bonus damage for projectile damage for 20 seconds, 1 minute recharge. We're using the subspace field modulator for the damage resistance, Kobayashi Maru for the random buffs it spits out to you and all your friends in the match, and then the Deuterium Surplus, and this is an extra little clicky to get a speed and turn rate boost as needed. So this is the X upgrade. So we have the universal slot here, and we are running the assimilated module. This is for the critical chance, critical severity. Next, we are running, and I always have a hard time saying this, this is Universal Console from the Terran Task Force rep. This is the, what is it? It's the ferrofluidic hydraulic assembly. I'm sure I butchered that. This is here mainly for the shared torpedo recharge reduction, although having the extra hit points that you get there at the top of the list is nice. It helps build Tyler's duality a little bit and get us a little bit of extra critical chance. the negative 0.5 second shared torpedo recharge time. So what that is when you fire a torpedo, there's a time in between when your next torpedo can fire. So you fire the first torpedo and there's this shared universal cooldown between the next one and the next one and the next one. And so by reducing that time by even a half a second, and especially if you have 4 up front, that's an extra 2 seconds, you're able to get all your torpedoes out 2 seconds faster per firing cycle. That adds up quite a bit. It doesn't look like a big number because it's not, but in reality it translates into quite a bit of extra damage. And that's why this console is here. The next 3 is like beating a dead horse. This is on every single one of my builds. These are all the Lobi consoles that I recommend getting, and these are all here for the critical chance and critical severity. Some of these will have extra benefits for other types of builds like control expertise, those kinds of things, which in a build like this doesn't really matter at all. On the tachyokinetic converter, we do get some additional flight turn rate, which again, on a ship like this that turns so well anyways, it's not a huge deal, but it's always nice to have a little bit extra. But these 3 Lobi consoles should generally be your first Lobi purchase. These can be used on basically every single build that you put together if you're wanting to build towards damage. Okay, moving on to the science consoles we have. I mean, they're not really science consoles, but the science console slots. We have the Ordnance Accelerator, and this is from the Gamma Rep. This is here. This is actually a very good console for kinetic overall build. I'm not getting the full effect out of it because on this particular ship I don't have any mines. So if this was a, let's say this was a 5.3, then I would have at least 1 mine in the back. Or let's say this was a top-end meta build and I was using Terran Goodbye, I wouldn't use the Morphogenic set because I would basically get a very similar effect from that trait, Terran Goodbye. And if it was a 5.3, I most likely would have mines all the way across the back of it. And this console reduces that shared cooldown between mines being launched, as we discussed on the one for torpedoes here. And this reduces that shared cooldown time by 1.5 seconds. It also gives us 20% mine recharge speed, so the actual ability, whatever the cooldown is on the particular mine itself, by 20%. So that's really nice if you're mixing mines with a torpedo build, which makes sense because the tactical consoles you get from the fleet and most of the things that buff kinetic damage is also going to buff your mine damage. I'm running it on this particular build because it is giving us an extra 26.3% projectile weapons damage, which are what torpedoes are. The other 2 items on here, phaser and polaron, obviously don't matter. Again, this would be decent for a polaron build as well. There's some 2 set bonuses that complement polaron, at least on the mid-tier level. You'd want to use those. As you got more to the high-end level, you would switch those out for other consoles, but let's not get sidetracked. Lastly, in the science console slots, we have the Swarmer Matrix, and this is here for the 30%. Turn rate's nice. You know, some of the other stuff's kind of whatever. Hanger pets. I don't have any hanger pets. And this is here for the torpedo or targetable torpedo speed. So when there's some torpedoes like the EBM, the first torpedo on the build, when you fire that under high yield, it's going to move much, much slower than it otherwise would. And so being able to increase that speed by 30% means it's getting there 30% faster than it otherwise would. There's less chance for that torpedo to be shot down. And is going to get you more damage. And then lastly on this, on the passives, we have a plus 50 projectile weapons training, which this is a projectile build, so more of that is better. The clickable is okay, so it's going to launch 5 drones, and they're going to fly around for 45 seconds, causing 945 physical damage with 100% shield penetration to the enemy. If you time this right, it's like if you were running, say, I don't know, the DPRM, when this is clicked, you can get a decent amount out of this. If you are also running like Ceaseless Momentum, which is another meta trait for a torpedo build, which I did leave off of this because it is very expensive to get now, this would also do even better as well. You can get this off of the exchange. This comes from the lockbox consoles, and it's fairly inexpensive compared to most other things that you would be after on the exchange. Okay, so for tactical consoles, we already talked about the Morphogenic. matrix here, which is part of this 3-piece set, so we won't talk about that again. We have the Lorca's custom fire control. Again, this is like beating a dead horse. It's on basically every build. The only build you wouldn't use this on is, say, like a science build that is just purely science abilities, you know, so you're not even building around the torpedoes whatsoever, but pretty much everything else you're going to want this on, along with the 2-piece, or in this case, the 3-piece. It is just an excellent, excellent console. We're getting almost 4% critical chance out of this, and we are also getting 157.5 starship shield penetration, which again on a torpedo build is wonderful. I'm using 2 vulnerability locators, and these are from your Fleet Spire, and we're using the torpedo variant of it. So the torpedo is your universal for basically anything that is a torpedo. So it covers, you know, your photons, your you know, any of the different flavors. I'm trying to think of what the other names are, and it's just leaving my mind here. So quantum torpedoes and on and on. So you can get variations of this that are specific to a particular kind of torpedo that will do more damage, but then you need to build around that specific torpedo. So if the whole ship isn't full of exactly one kind of torpedo, do not do that, because you're going to end up losing out on the damage from the other ones when you could use something like this. So use the one that has the torpedo modifier on it. Lastly, for the gear, we have the Torment engine. This comes from one of the new Klingon missions in the Klingon Civil War, and this is it here to increase your non-hazard damage over time, which I believe affects the isolytic tears from the trait that I continue to allude to that I have not named yet, but it also increases radiation, fire, and plasma and physical damage. Many of these torpedoes are doing secondary damage that is radiation. In fact, the first 3 are, and so this is helping with those modifiers that it has. So these torpedoes are not affected by EPG, although they have similar effects to what you would get from EPG, you know, damage effects, but they are not. And so this console here really, really boosts that. We're also using Chemosite 1, and so this is also going to boost that as well. Let's take a look real quick in the mission log at exactly where that comes from so you guys can see. So this is going to come from the new arc, as I said. And if I can click the right buttons there, that's one wrong button click for the counter. So Klingon Civil War, and this is going to be Leap of Faith. So you're going to run this mission once and go ahead and pick up the Torment engine. I may put together just like a budget build just to see what we can get out of it. I most likely will use the torpedo from this as well just to experiment and see how it does. But definitely this Torment engine is very good. I'm using it on my tank, and I'm also using it on my science builds currently. And it's doing very, very well on those. Okay, so that's the ship gear, and again, I just want to give props where props are due. Augmented Dictator really kind of pioneered this build. I mean, it's somewhat adjusted, but he started at one point and it's continually evolved, and this has basically a whole bunch of pieces of that evolution there. So he did a great job on that. And again, if you're looking for the real high-end stuff when it comes to the torpedo builds, definitely check out his channel. Let's go ahead. We're going to jump over to the traits next. So let's just recap on the Morphogenic set. Okay, so the Morphogenic set, the 3-piece, if I click on and we'll just take a look at this. If I start clicking on energy weapons and cannon fire modes, you're going to see that my critical chance, my critical severity have gone up by 2 and by 10. When they cool down, if I click those again, they'll continue to go up. If I were to click the torpedo ability, that would raise that Cat 1 damage by the 7.5 as well. Again, not a real big deal. It's mainly here for this critical chance and severity. So let's take a look. Critical chance, and we're up another 2. And then critical severity from the cannons, we're up another 10. So that'll stack one more time on top of that. Now, the reason that this makes sense, and we're going to jump over to the traits here to take a look at this, is because of this trait right here, Entwined Tactical Matrices. This comes from the Gagarin, and then there's a Klingon version of this. If you would prefer, that ship has a battle battle cloak, and I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. Someone can throw that in the comments. But what this does, what we're looking at is the second part of this. So we do not have a torpedo spread on here, even though this is a torpedo build. And the reason for that is because we want to have as many torpedo spreads as we can get. But if I put more than one, you're going to have that shared cooldown between the two, and you're going to have that long period in between each one of them as you're trying to toggle back and forth. So what we do is we use this trait here, and if we look at the second part here, it says when activating fire at will or cannon scatter volley, we are going to get a torp spread 1 applied to ourselves. So that means if we were to enter combat, we're coming up to the bad guys, and this is on my spam bar here. I'm going to click that, and I got in range and started firing torpedoes. I would get a spread that comes out. Immediately after that, I could then click this here, or fire at will, and I would get a second torpedo spread that would immediately come out after that. This is on my spam bar here, so these would be cooling down, and it's ready again. Here's another spread that's going out, and again, we would be cooling this down using the spam bar, and this one is almost ready to fire again. So you can see that rate of fire of torpedo spreads is very, very high by using this trait. And this is really, I think, the foundation that makes a torpedo build work. So if you had, no other traits that, we would generally use on a torpedo build, then you would want to start with acquiring this. This is an excellent trait as well for using on like a tank or on any kind of fire at will build, because if we look at the top one, what I do on my tank, for instance, is I'm using fire at will 3 and torpedo spread 1. And so what's happening is when I hit fire at will 3, I'm also getting a free torpedo spread 1, and when I hit torpedo spread 1 or 2 or 3, whatever you have slotted, I'm getting a free fire at will 1 along with that torpedo spread. So I'm basically being able to toggle back and forth and keep fire at will up almost 100% of the time while getting a free torpedo spread in between that constantly. You can even use this for cannon scatter volley, although with the ship that we got from the Klingon recruit, you would be better off using that, which is Withering Barrage. But in a pinch, this is a very, very good, useful universal trait that you can use on tanks, torpedo builds, and on cannon scatter volley builds. So definitely worthwhile getting. If you're going to do a torpedo build, you want to start with at least having this here. Let's just go ahead and finish out the traits, and then we'll take a look at the bridge officer seating and the skill tree. Next in our must-have, or next on the list for your most important trait for your torpedo build, is going to be the subspatial warheads. This trait comes off of the Sona Intel battle cruiser. It is a Lobi ship. This would be your next preferable one in terms of things that are going to cost you money. When I looked at this on the exchange, it was going for in between 270 and 280 million EC, which is a lot. If you were going to go after this, the best way to do it would be to purchase keys and sell them on the exchange. They go in between 9 and 10 million, and so the math that I did, you're looking at about 43 bucks if you just buy the keys and sell them on the exchange and then just buy this ship. So this would be the next one. The other alternative to this, and this is where we're going to kind of get into checking, or at least showing you, because some of these traits that are meta traits that are extremely expensive used to be really, really cheap for the Fed side. And this is one of them here. So let's just talk about this real quick. So this is Ceaseless Momentum. And what this is going to do is when firing any torpedo, we're going to get a plus 5% bonus kinetic damage that lasts for 45 seconds. It's a Cat 2 bonus. It's excellent. Plus 5 bonus kinetic damage resistance, so that'll help protect ourselves, and then that is going to stack up to 5 times, so that's going to give us a 25% bonus damage for our kinetic damage output, which is the majority of what the ship is doing, which is just a huge boost. You're also going to get a -1 second recharge time for your torpedoes as well, which is every little bit adds up with the rest of what we're doing to cool this stuff down. And so this used to be extremely cheap for Fed characters. It comes from the Cleave ship. I don't know if that's the actual name of it. That's just what we call it. It looks almost like a pirate ship in space. It's a lockbox ship. It was only for the KDF side. And so prior to the ship wall coming down, the cross-faction flyability on ships, this was given away basically. I mean, you could buy it for, 100K EC. I mean, just nothing, next to nothing. But since that faction wall has come down, this is skyrocketed and extremely hard to find by itself on the exchange. If you do find it, it tends to be pretty damn expensive. That's why I left it off the build. If I had made this video, 8 months ago or prior to that, then this would have been, second on the list, followed by the Lobby ship trait. But, depending on the resources you have, it might make sense to go after this first. I haven't checked to see what this cost right now, but if it's less than the Sona Intel battle cruiser, you may want to go after this first, because this is a huge extra boost. But this trait, especially on your meta high-end builds, this is going to produce your #1 damage getter on the parse. So it shows up under pets, isolytic tears, and it's by far going to be the highest damage getter once you get up to that high end. So in a perfect world, you're going to want both the ceaseless momentum and the subspace warheads. But for something easier to obtain, you definitely have to start with the Entwined Tactical Matrix. Depending on your resources, get whatever one's easier. Both is better. This one is going to give you more damage outputs, the bottom line. Next, I have Strike from Shadows. This is here for the extra critical chance and the all damage bonus Cat 2 boost that we get, as well as the threat generation reduction. So this helps keep the enemy from looking at us as much, helping keeping us alive. As you can see on the ship, I basically have no heals except for hazard emitters that are really here for a different purpose, which we'll go over here shortly. So this is an excellent trait. I used Sniper, and this is going to give us a bonus damage output based on your distance. This came with this particular ship. Again, if you are short on traits, you can put this in. This is somewhat counterintuitive to how I would recommend flying a torpedo build. On a torpedo build, you're going to want to be close. You want to shorten that flight time. So with directed energy weapons, it's almost instantaneous. It fires, it hits. Torpedoes take time to hit. And so what can happen is, #1, other people can kill those ships before your torpedoes are getting there. And even if you do kill the ship, you're just hitting the ship less because there's less time, or there's more time for those to actually connect. So the closer you are, the much more damage output you're going to be able to put out, especially if you're running mines as well. Mines don't have a real long chase distance, and so if you can be right up on them, as soon as those pop out, those things are hitting and you're getting a lot more damage. With that being said, I still have to approach the enemy, and it's not like I'm not shooting as I'm approaching them. So you'll find your positioning, especially if a map gets real messy, stuff's all over the place, and you're going to get a benefit out of this trait here. So if it's all you have, put it in there. It synergizes with the build well. You just have to, I just wouldn't fly your ship around what this trait wants for it to proc, right? So if you're running this trait, don't make sure that you're as far away as possible. Just know that when you are farther away, you're getting more damage, but you want to be up closer. The second part of this trait is also going to give us an additional 5% critical chance for the 10 seconds. And that is going to start procking for you at 5 kilometers and farther. So you get the most out of this in terms of the bonus damage at just right under 10 kilometers. But again, I think overall you're going to end up seeing somewhat of a reduction, or maybe it'll just offset and be similar. In any case. The other thing you could use here, and I just don't have it unlocked on this particular character, is Promise of Veracity. So Promise of Veracity and the Strike from Shadows are on the top 5 C-Store ships and traits. Excellent universal traits that can be used across the board. Basically, that gives you a stacking damage boost while you're in combat and killing enemies. So that's something else you could put into either one of these 2 slots. I filled these with 2 of the specialization traits. So when you complete a specialization like strategist, for instance, you fill all these out, it will unlock a trait for you, and that trait is this here, which is unconventional tactics. And what this does is it turns brace for impact into a clicky that's going to give us 15% bonus all damage for 15 seconds, which is a nice little boost. You could put this on your spam bar if you're running like in intelligence attaché or something like that, because you would get a quicker cooldown on it and can use it a little more often. I don't have that on this tune, so I'm clicking it manually when I want to use it. The last one is from the Intel specialization, and we're getting some debuff removal and some accuracy. I could leave this off this build and we wouldn't notice any difference whatsoever, but I can't have empty spots because it bothers me a lot. So that is why this is here, but I did mention some other options. If you have been purchasing or getting any of the ships that I've been discussing in other videos, there are traits from those that you could use on this build that would synergize with it very, very well. Let's take a look at the reputation space traits. So we're using Tyler's Duality. This is a scaling critical chance boost based on your hit points. This is used pretty much on all of my builds. Same with these next two. Advanced targeting systems for the plus 15 or plus 16% critical severity. And then we have precision, which is giving us an additional 5% critical chance. We're using Omega Kinetic Shearing, and this is dealing 12% of your outgoing damage as a dot over time. So, and the Torment engine, I would assume, would be boosting this, but to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. If you know, let me know in the comments whether or not this is boosted by the Torment engine. And then lastly, we are using the Torpedo Pre-Fire sequence. And this is giving us a massive boost, a 15.6 bonus Cat 2 damage for our torpedoes. And it's also giving us an additional speed boost for those destructible torpedoes. So that synergizes obviously perfectly with the torpedo build. Personal space traits, we're using Context is for Kings. This is giving us either a damage boost or a damage resistance boost based on whether or not we took damage in the last second or not. Next, we are using the Adaptive Offense. This is giving us a stacking critical chance boost. We're using Fleet Coordinator, and this is giving us 2% bonus damage for ourselves and all our team members. So if you're in a standard TFO, you're getting an extra 10% bonus damage by running this. Next, we are using Innocuous, and this is for the threat reduction. Again, not a lot of heals here. We want to reduce that threat as much as possible, and then the extra 5% critical severity. I am using the Particle Manipulator, and this is for the, I believe this is for the Isolytic Tears. But to be honest with you at this point, I'm kind of questioning that, because I don't know if that's affected by EPG. Someone let me know on that. I should really ask Augie about that too. But if you know, put that in the comments. But I'm assuming it does, and that is why it's here, to get this additional critical hit for an exotic damage. And I'm assuming that that is affecting that, because there's not really anything else on this ship that is doing exotic damage that I'm aware of. Well, there's nothing else that's doing that. I don't have any exotic damage abilities on there, so we'll check on that. But I've been running that because that's what the meta was. I should probably know a little bit better, but stuff gets pretty complicated. Okay, moving along, we have Resonating Payload modulation, and this is giving us a negative. And this one we need to pull up the tooltip here. So this is your torpedo warhead payloads are now additionally equipped with a electromagnetic resonation device that will temporarily destabilize the integrity of your target's hull. Okay, so this is giving us a physical and kinetic resistance debuff for 20 seconds per attack, 5 stacks maximum. So again, synergizes with this build. We're putting out kinetic and physical damage. Next, we have Self-Modulating Fire. This is on a critical hit. Our energy weapons and projectile weapons are going to gain a 50% shield penetration for 10 seconds. Very, very nice. This can only occur, though, every 45 seconds, which is kind of a bummer. But it's still worthwhile having, especially if it happens to time out in a way that is advantageous, although you have no control over that. So next, we have Terran Targeting Systems. This is on basically all of my builds as well. This is giving us an extra 15% critical severity, and it does give us a reduction to our flight speed, and it is completely unnoticeable. So I would disregard that it even says that. And then lastly, we are using Projectile Training, and obviously this is for the plus 5% bonus projectile damage. Let's take a look at our skills. So I am using Strategist and Temporal. And the Temporal is for the damage over time effects that the weapons have, Chemosight has, and the Isolytic Tears. Skill tree, I'll just scroll through this. This is very similar to Augie's Catch-All, although I like to make some minor adjustments on our hull plating and for our ablative hull plating for that extra kinetic damage resistance. It makes me feel better, and I feel like I stay alive longer. I'm sure I do because of that, especially when you're doing pug runs and those kinds of things. And again, we don't have any heals, so resistance is extremely helpful for us. Let's take a look at our bridge officer seating. Okay, so for our bridge officer seating, so this ship is basically all universal with the exception of the bottom seat here. It has to be tactical. So what I did is we put science in the first one here. I have hazard emitters. The main reason hazard emitters are here, it's a nice repair heal over time, but if you take a look at the critical chance, and when I click hazard emitters, I'm getting an extra 3% off of that, and that comes from running the strategist specialization. So that is the primary reason that I have that there. We are using the destabilizing resonance beam. This does a decent amount of physical damage. There's a lot of stuff that is on this build that is boosting that, and so that synergizes with this pretty well. This is a mission drop from one of the missions in the Iconian arc, and I can't remember off the top of my head which one that is. I'm sure someone can fill us in there in the comments, or you can look it up, but it's a free drop that you can get, and it'll unlock the crafting ability and also a copy of each of the different tiers of that. Next, we are using concentrated firepower, and what this is doing is it's marking a target, and what it's essentially doing is giving us an extra high yield and a reduction on the recharge time on our torpedo. And so this is proccing that trait. And now that I'm thinking back, did we fully go over this here? Let's do that. I think I got sidetracked here. So the subspace warheads off the Sona ship, what it's going to do is any kind of high yield torpedo, it is going to give us a isolytic tear that's going to hang around in that area and do physical damage over time. So anytime that we transport a warhead, which I don't have that ability here, or anytime we do a high yield. So I have high yield 3 on my spam bar, and then also with concentrated firepower, we are getting extra high yields from that as well. And so we're able to create quite a few of these rifts, and they do a tremendous amount of damage, especially if all of the enemy gets bulked up together, or if you're using it on a large, boss target or something like that, a gate or a large cube or something like that. This is going to just do a tremendous amount of damage for you. And so that concentrated firepower by itself will do decent damage as well, but also being able to proc that trait is massive. So it's really a twofer. This is a must-have. If you don't have this ship and you're looking for, you're wanting to do a torpedo build, basically what you're looking for, it doesn't even have to be a 5.2. I was actually going to do this video on the Titan science destroyer, but I opted not to because it has secondary deflector and some other things, and it's a little more of a weird build. I wanted to do just a pure torpedo straightforward build. We could probably move on to something like that a little bit later down the road, but I wanted to start with kind of the basic fundamentals of the torpedo builds. But what you're looking for is a ship that will have the ability to have the lieutenant commander concentrated firepower. You need to have that on your torpedo build. Could you make it work with 2? Sure. Can you make it work without? Yeah, but you're going to do much less damage. So, use what you have. If you don't have the ability to get something different, don't just give up and say, oh, I'm not going to do a torpedo build. You can still do one, and it's going to work okay, and you're still going to have a lot of fun with it, and you can always move that build over to another ship, as you get a new one. But if you're going to build, a mid-tier, high-end, or, meta torpedo build, you need to be able to slot concentrated firepower 3. All right. In our next slot here, running engineering, and we have emergency power 2 engines. This is here to proc the duty officer that I have from the Phoenix pack. And what it does is when I use evasive maneuvers and it goes on to its cooldown, if I click emergency power 2 engines, you will see that'll drop that cooldown way down and it is ready to use again. For the cooldowns on this whole build, we're using Augmented, so I'm running an Augmented here and another one here. I have a whole video on that I did a couple weeks back if you're interested in looking at how that works and how to go about setting that up. I didn't have much to put here. This is somewhat of an expensive bridge officer ability. It comes off of or out of your choice packs from a lockbox. You can buy it off the exchange. I mean, it's not outrageous, but I'm sure it's 10 to 20 million. So it's not super cheap. But this is giving us a physical damage over time. So a pretty big boost here at 1,122.2 physical damage every second for 15 seconds. It's also giving us a substantial reduction or debuff for physical and kinetic damage resistance, which on a torpedo build here, this is an excellent bridge officer ability to be able to have. Next, we are using Let It Go. This does some cold damage over time, which is whatever. It barely shows up on the parse. The main reason I have this here, and I use this on pretty much all my builds, I don't force it, but if I need to fill a spot, I have this in most of these, available to me in most of these different ranked areas here. So I normally use this as filler. It's not like a must have, but a lot of times you end up with just extra slots that, you know, whatever the build is, you just don't have to have a particular thing. So it's nice when you can have useful stuff that you can kind of fill these things with. And this is one of them. This comes from the winter event store. And the main reason this is here is for the -5 all damage resistance. The nice thing about this is it is a damage, it's a reduction over time. So it's -5 all damage resistance every second for 20 seconds, and it stacks up to 20 times. So if you use this on, you know, a boss or a dreadnought or something that has high hit points that's going to be alive for at least 20 seconds, by the time this expires, it's ramped up to quite a substantial damage resistance debuff. So it's nice to have. Again, it's not a game changer, or it's not going to break the build if you don't have it, but it's a nice filler. Okay, moving over to our first tactical slot here. So I have the Fire at Will here, and this is again to proc the Morphogenic set and to proc the Entwined Tactical Matrix trait, so we get that free torpedo spread. And just to clarify too, we're using these not only to get those free ones, but these do not share a cooldown, right? So, you know, if I click that, this doesn't automatically go on cooldown, and that's really kind of the magic of the whole thing, is that you're able to use off abilities from each other to get the same result. Next, we have on the final must-use tactical slot here, I have Chemosite 1, and this is adding a radiation damage effect to our torpedoes. It works on the energy weapons as well, but it's a 10% chance to trigger on energy weapons. On projectile weapons, it's a 100% chance. So this is going off every single time you're hitting an enemy with the torpedo. So this is very nice for the torpedo build. We have the cannon scatter volley, again to proc the Morphogenic set, and for the Entwined Tactical Matrix for our Torp spread 1. And then we have our high yield 3, which does a ton of damage, and then this also procs our trait that gives us the isolytic tears. Lastly, we have attack pattern beta, and this is here for the massive damage reduction, resistance reduction debuff to the enemy that you get out of this. You could also use Omega here, which will give you a bonus damage boost, and if you had like the trait, what is it, attack pattern theta, it comes off of the Romulan legendary ship, that would also proc an additional high yield. So you would have 3 sources of being able to fire out high yields, and would be advantageous on a particular build like this. But you would need to have that trait in order to get that proc out of it. All right, let's take a look at our duty officers. All right, so we're running on the bottom here our technicians. These again are for the Oxtabat cooldowns. I'm running 18 of 47. First one, anytime, or the first effect has 2 effects. So activating an engineering bridge officer ability is going to give us a 15% chance to improve team-wide hull hit points by 10% for 30 seconds. That'll help boost Tyler's duality a little bit, and is kind of a meh. If that wasn't there, it really wouldn't make any difference. Using a command ability is going to have a 30% chance to improve our weapon's armor penetration by 50 for 30 seconds. Now that is a nice boost for our torpedo build here. Again, none of these items in particular are deal breakers for the build. The one thing that you could drop off of this that would like cut the damage in half is going to be entwined tactical matrices. That is really kind of the number one thing that you're going to want to go after if you don't have that. So if you don't have some of these things, you can fill in just with whatever you have and then just slowly build it up, and you'll find that it'll still perform okay, and it'll just get better over time. Next, we have the bridge officer that is giving us that cooldown on the evasive maneuvers, which I demonstrated a moment ago with emergency powered weapons. And then lastly, we are using projectile weapons officer, and this is giving us a chance to increase our kinetic damage from torpedoes. If you didn't have this, I'm not even sure where I got that. It sounds expensive, but if you don't have that, you could use like Law. And let's just take a look at him. He comes from a mission drop from, I think it's Blind Men Tell No Tales, or it's from the arc on Nimbus. So if you go play through that, I think it's the first or second mission, you can get this guy here. And what he'll do is he will give you a 20% chance to reduce the recharge time by 5 seconds on your torpedoes. And you can actually stack 3 of these up. There's other duty officers that do the exact same thing. I think you can get them from like, the reinforcement missions from the academy, and I'm sure they're not real expensive on the exchange either, especially if you go with like a blue one or something like that. So that is our bridge officer, or I'm sorry, our duty officers. Let's take a quick look at the endeavors, and then we'll jump into a ISA and get a baseline on this here. So I am at 259, and I'll just kind of scroll down just so it's caveated for the run. I'm decently high. There's others that are well over 300. In my free-to-play, I'm under 200. Once you start getting some of these, crit chance, crit severity, energy weapon, projectile weapon training up fairly high, you'll really start to notice that difference, especially, if you start a new tune or something like that. It's just a decent-sized boost. I got to be honest, I've gotten pretty lazy on it. That's why I'm not, up as high as some of these other guys. I just, the ones today aren't too bad. The ones yesterday, repair shields on ground. It's not happening. I'm sorry. It's just too much for me. But, if you're new and this is well under 100, grind it out. I mean, I grinded it out pretty hard until I hit about 150, started getting some of these up. I'm just kind of over the min-max. I just want to come in, have fun. I like doing a lot of damage, but, I don't have to be number one, and I'm not going to be, and I'm okay with that. I'm having fun doing what I'm doing, so these are definitely helpful, but I'm not one of those people who are going to tell you, you have to do them or you're just blowing it, because, I'd be lying because that's not what I'm doing. So, all right, guys, that is the build there. Let's go ahead and jump into an ISA and take a look at how that performs. right, well, here we go. That's the best run I've had with this particular build. I am extremely happy with that. I've ran this build through 4 of them. One of them was lagged out and got thrown away. The lowest I did in this was 170 something K. This is the last run that I've done, and this is by far the best that I've gotten out of this. In fact, I'm surprised because even with it built, you know, with all the other meta traits and stuff, this is kind of around where I end up averaging. So, but you know, a lot of these runs have a lot to do with what everybody else is doing as well. In this, everybody went to the correct places. Some of the team didn't do a lot of damage, but they were still helping. They were still in the right places. Some of them might have been doing some kind of debuffing. I don't know any of these people. This is just a random run. I did one before this where I was scratching 200K, but it was a split run. Somebody went to the other side and annihilated everything. It was still a good run, but it wasn't your typical run that you would have where everybody goes, you know, left to right and that kind of thing. So in any case, 226 with, you know, a mid-tier build of a torpedo build, I think is excellent. It is excellent. So let's just take a look at the parse here. In fact, I wonder if that is an upload. We'll check that in a minute because that'll take forever. Let's look at the breakdown here, and we'll see where we got all our damage from. So as expected, the pets did the most. And so this doesn't obviously have hanger pets, but it counts the isolytic tears as pets. So that is the majority of what is boosting this damage on this build. Without that, we would be, how much do we do on pets total? We'll have to go back and look, but we would be what? Let's just look here. So without that, would be 30K less, which is still a respectable run. That's, you know, just under 200K, just under that. Without that trait. So if you have entwined tactical matrices, the rest of this stuff on the ship is going to come from your rep, provided you have those low B consoles, and you can be scratching the 200 on a very good run. And this was a really good run. So next, our Soliton Wave Impeller did pretty darn good as well. This is just an excellent experimental weapon. And then you can see as we go down the list here, the torpedoes do very well. But again, this is really coming down to proccing that trait, you know, is really kind of the main thing. So let's say you didn't have the isolytic tear trait, subspace warheads, so that'd be less that 30. K there, 33K. Let's say you didn't have the Soliton Wave Impeller, you're still probably going to get at least half of that out of another one that's fully upgraded. So you would still be in that upper 100, you know, range, 175, 180 on a build that just had the entwined tactical matrix and then whatever else you had to fill in the rest of those traits. If you have some of the other traits that I've gone over in other videos that are your universal traits, like what is it? The one I mentioned earlier from the, oh, my whole mind's going blank. Anyways, we'll have to go back and look at that video, but all of them except for the emergency power weapon cycle will help boost this as well. And I'm not using any of them on this except from the strike from Shadow. So if you have any of those other ones, not preferential targeting, I better just forget about it. It's going to drive me crazy. But if you have some of the, you know, whatever else you have, just fill it in. It may not be, you know, perfect synergizing with a torpedo build, but if you're getting even a little bit of benefit out of it, put it in, and you can fill in those gaps as you move forward and get more resources. So overall, I'm extremely happy with this run. And especially, like I said, given the nature of the scaled down version of it, I think it did very good. Well, I think that covers it, guys. I appreciate everybody watching. I apologize that this video is a lot longer than most of the videos I do. I don't do a lot of kind of full build videos because they just tend to be so long, but there's not really a way around it. You know, in the past, we would do a run, we would pull up, you know, our loadout, we'd hover over it, and that would be it. But that really doesn't give you any kind of context. It doesn't speak to why things are the way they are. And I know I miss a lot of stuff. A lot of that gets asked in the comments. You join the Discord Discord as well. You know, we can fill in those gaps if I did miss things or you didn't understand something. We have a great community there. Excuse me. But with, you know, with these build videos, I think it's important to talk about why things are working, what the thought process is behind, you know, why we're putting them together, how we're putting them together, because you could just copy this build, but if you don't understand why and how it works, it's just not going to perform for you like it does for me or for others that do. You know, especially with some of the things we're clicking and what's in the spam bar, if you're using a spam bar, and how to order those things, and those, you know, that kind of stuff makes a big difference. I know, you know, in the past, you know, other, you know, big DPSers, I'll go and, you know, I'll check their build out, I'll copy it, and I'm doing half of what they're doing, and it's exactly the same. I mean, there's nothing different, and that's because they developed that build. They understand, you know, why this is working with that and how to time this out to, you know, maximize that, you know, whatever that may be. Again, you know, there's not really a big way around, you know, really kind of talking through these. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. If it was, please consider hitting the sub button, ringing the bell, the thumbs up, all the things. Join the Discord. I got a great community in there. If you have questions about this build or anything else Star Trek related, definitely feel free, jump in and ask away. You know, you got, everybody's more than welcome there. All right, well, I think that covers it, guys. Have a great one. Again, thank you very, very much for watching, and until next time, stay safe.